wrote, I thought, one of the best biographies of Mussolini besides Dennis. Was it Dennis Mack Smith's?
Dennis Mack Smith, yeah.
Dennis Mack Smith wrote the other definitive biography.
He did.
This guy, Lawler, I think, wrote the counter biography to that. I think he's a fascinating figure, and I thought he did a great job of writing the book.
And of course,
But by the way, this is one of the problems we have today. If you say something like that in a 2-hour interview, it's brought up and everybody melts down.
Because you are a student of history, and therefore you would be familiar with the private correspondence between Mussolini and his longtime lover. By the way, he had 5 children by his long-suffering wife and 9 children by his 8 other lovers. Now,
I did throw virility in there, didn't I?
In the private correspondence between Mussolini and his lover, he described Jews as pigs, a people destined to be wiped out.
Is the point here to say Mussolini's not a good guy? Mussolini's not. By the way, he's a very evil guy.
Right.
Doesn't mean he's not fascinating.
Yeah.
But this is the problem we have. If you say the guy's fascinating and he's worthy of study because he is worthy of study, particularly in today's environment, right? All of a sudden, he's anti-Semitic. Yes, he was anti-Semitic. He was a terrible guy, and he led his country to the verge of destruction. If it wasn't for the deplorables, kids from Kansas and Wisconsin, etc., that went over and freed the Italian people. Yeah. So I didn't say he was a good guy. I said he was a fascinating guy. And even though he said all that stuff, he's still fascinating.
Right. Let's move on to the important speech that you gave in Zurich, which talked about the new serfdom. And you say here that the biggest danger we have is state capitalism. These companies, technology companies, that debase your currency, debase your citizenship, and take your personhood digitally. What did you mean by that? And especially bearing in mind the fact that you've done rather well out of digital technology.
I think this is very important. I think the 3 converging forces, and we'll get into Cambridge Analytica, I'm sure, in a second.
We will.
I'm sure we will. What I said in Zurich and what I said to the Front National people, the center of my discussion. The reason I went to Zurich is the center, or the Silicon Valley of cryptocurrency. You have 3 converging forces right now, I believe, in the world. Number 1 is this center-right populist nationalist movement that is politically driven and is driven a lot by social media. On the second, you have this cryptocurrency or blockchain. In the third, you have this concept of digital sovereignty, okay? The taking of your intellectual property assets. And they're all converging, I think, to empower this movement. Central governments debase your citizenship. Central banks debase your currency. And the central technocratic state capitalism we have with Google and Facebook take your personhood and basically take away your intellectual property, your digital sovereignty. And by the way, I'm glad this amazing paper, the Financial Times today,
He did not get paid for that advertisement.
Which the Financial Times never agreed with anything. Today, its lead editorial, digital privacy rights require data ownership. Now, they didn't give me a shout-out for Zurich and but they agree. The future, by the way, right now you're serfs, okay? You're well-paid serfs, but you're serfs. They've debased your currency, and so and they underwrite debt, right, for sovereign governments at 0 interest rates. So you're always on the spinning wheel like a little hamster, trying to get ahead because they've destroyed the ability of thrift, of you to save to get ahead. The same thing on on your digital assets, your intellectual property. They take it all for free. So when Zuckerberg goes on TV yesterday, Zuckerberg gives the New York Times an interview, and the opposition party media plays patty cake with him. It doesn't ask him one tough question. Okay? His entire business model is made upon taking that data for free and monetizing it, and then writing algorithms behind a wall that treat you like hamsters on a wheel.
Right.
That's their business model.
I'm so glad you've raised Facebook because, as you know, you were an investor in Cambridge Analytica.
I helped put the company together.
And yes, you did. And
gave it that amazing name.
Yeah. What a
stroke of genius.
Stroke of genius.
Yeah, because the whole Cambridge
it's just branding it. I mean, it's actually an empty shell.
Just branding.
What was the guy like, Alexander Nix?
I'd rather not comment on Alexander Nix. Etonian. Old Etonian.
Oh.
Shows you about the education system among the elites in England. But by the way, let's talk about Cambridge Analytica for a second. The data. The data is just the cost. The data from Facebook is just about the cost of it. That data is out there. There's a marketplace for your data. It's bought and sold every day.
Yeah, but the people didn't know it was being leaked.
That's the difference. That's the issue between Cambridge, the professor, and Facebook. And by the way, there's an open.
Were you aware of that leak? You didn't.
I didn't even know about. Didn't even know about the Facebook mining. But hang on. The point is that is Facebook's business. In 2008, it was Google and Facebook that went to Barack Obama and met him in San Francisco Airport and told him all about the power of this personal data. In 2012, and we have the woman who headed up data integrity said, "Hey, Facebook gave us the information because they were quote unquote on our side." So the great opposition party, media, never went after the Obama campaign, never went after the progressive leftists, have been doing this for years. And in 2013, when I thought that a data company might be important, all of a sudden it becomes global news. Yeah. And by the way, the information out there, the information for the Facebook thing, it's just about the cost of it. Well, did the guy pay $1 or you got to pay $2 or $3 for it? It's just a cost thing. That data is all out there.
No.
And that's how Facebook. That's how they take your stuff for free. They sell it and monetize it for huge margins. That's why the companies trade for such high valuations. Then they write algorithms and control your life. And yet when Zuckerberg comes, he sounds like a first-year associate hired in corporate development, mumbles through the whole interview, and nobody asks him a tough following question.
Right. Let's just go back to that wonderfully named Cambridge Analytica.
Yep.
You will be
You're like a dog with a bone on this, aren't you?
It's a tasty bone, though. There's a lot of juice.
There's still a lot of meat left on that bone.
Yeah. So let's just pick it apart here, because Mr. Nix, he didn't just boast about the data he had. He boasted about the dirty tricks.
That's all. Okay, that's another company. That's SEL. That's his company, run by Brits, old Etonians.
With Robert Mercer's investment?
Absolutely not. There's not a penny of Robert Mercer's money. SEL, no way. SEL is a separate company. It's their company that does stuff throughout the world.
So you're
right? All staffed by British guys from Cambridge and Oxford.
Not all Etonians, though.
Not all old Etonians. But whatever they do in the world is not it. All Cambridge Analytica is the data scientist and the applied applications here in the United States. It has nothing to do with the international stuff. The Guardian actually tells you that, and the Observer tell you that when you get down to the 10th paragraph. Okay? When you get down to the 10th paragraph, and what Nix does overseas is what Nix does overseas. Right? It was a data company. And by the way, Cruz's campaign and the Trump campaign say, hey, they were a pretty good data company, but this whole thing on psychographics was optionality in the deal. If it ever worked, it worked. But it hasn't worked, and it doesn't look like it's going to work. So it was never even applied. Here's the point. The progressive left and the opposition party cannot get over one basic fact. Donald J. Trump is president of the United States, and he beat Hillary Clinton. He beat her badly. First, you had to run to Russia. Okay? Now, Russia didn't work out. How do we know Russia didn't work out? Because the House report shows you there's nothing on collusion. And Mueller's investigation shows you he's looking at either Trump Organization financials or he's looking at... Hang on. He's looking at obstruction of justice. My point is you struck out on Russia, and now you've got to go to Cambridge Analytica. That's what won it for you. Here's what won it for you. Here's what won it for Trump. Economic nationalism and talking in a plain voice to the American people.
Okay. I think I've heard that record before, but
that happens to be the facts.
Just let's have a quick answer here. Do you believe that Donald Trump should shake up and sack his legal team?
I've said that from day one. I've been public.
So what's the significance of John Dowd's?
Well, he got fired. I mean, they brought in Geneva to be much more aggressive, and I think I think it's pretty obvious that Ty Cobb and John Dowd did a very Okay, let's just step back. Why did I get lit up on Capitol Hill by the House Intel Committee? Because the White House, Don McGahn, exerted executive privilege over any questions about the transition or the White House. I answered every question on the campaign about Russian collusion. Okay? Schiff and these guys' heads are blowing up. Today, he's going to subpoena me again because of the transition in the White House, because Don McGahn exerted executive privilege. Ty Cobb and John Dowd had a radical theory. Let's totally cooperate and waive executive privilege. Okay? I have said, as I told the president and told everybody, and I told Brother Dowd, I think that's wrong. There is a process. There's a process that Reagan used, there's a process that Clinton used, there's a process that Bush used. And I think you ought to go through that process.
Right.
And that's why, by the way, John Dowd's a good man, and I think that's why essentially more aggressive attorneys got brought in that are now, I think President Trump's going to war. I think it's very obvious he's going to go to war in this.
Right. Now, let's just talk history for a moment. You're a student of ancient Rome. More Plutarch compared to me, Tacitus. Would you, if you think about it, would you describe Donald Trump as the new American Caesar?
No, not at all. I think he's one of the Gracchi. I've said he's like Tiberius Gracchi. He's a populist. He's anything but a dictator. He's a populist. He's brought more people into this process of governing. He's very prudent. When you talk about a dictator, how can a dictator take 9 months to make the decision he made on Afghanistan? How can a dictator? You guys broke a story.
Do you know why I came up with that analogy?
Why?
Because Donald Trump wanted. This was the moment he wanted and wants a military parade, and the moment for Caesar when he crossed the Rubicon was when he brought the Roman soldiers into the capital. That's the analogy.
Wow, you're working that one.
But that's
no. I think he's
totally convincing. Isn't
I think he's no. I think he wants. Look, he's a patriot. He went to France because he went to France, and I think he was very.
But he didn't serve in Vietnam. Why
did Macron serve in any of the French wars?
I'm not talking about.
No, but I think he was inspired by what he saw on Bastille Day. It's a very inspiring thing where you see all these military units.
What, my parade's bigger than your parade?
No, but I do think I think it's great for American patriots. It's going to be on Veterans Day. I think it gives the veterans something to parade. And I think it's going to be terrific.
Do you think it's appropriate to have tanks rolling past the Capitol?
Well, they're not going to have tanks, but
just be planes.
But by the way, I think it's fine having tanks go past the Capitol. Remember, after he won the Civil War, we had a parade for 2 days. The Grand Army of the Republic came for 2 days to the Capitol. What's wrong with having our military go through the Capitol? We're proud of our veterans. We're proud of our armed services. This is the kind of reaction. This is the kind of reaction that just makes the deplorables angrier and angrier because they think the global elite and the propaganda arm for the global elite, the paper of the Financial Times, it's the way that you go after Trump on something he's trying to do with his basic
you're wrong. They think of Harry Truman, who fired Douglas MacArthur. That's what they think.
Well, President Trump, by the way, President Trump, I think, has done a fantastic job in with his generals. Mm-hmm. I think President Trump he's taken. Look, you guys broke the story on Korea. The very first time that President Trump ever really talked about Korea was in the Financial Times interview you guys did a year ago, right? And look at the movement that he's made on the Korean situation. And I don't totally agree with how everything that's happened there, but he's done a fantastic job. Look in Afghanistan. He's the least trigger-happy, president we've had in a long time. And the opposition media, right, and the entire time in the run-up to this campaign about what a madman he was, how he was unstable, how he was unacceptable to be commander-in-chief. In fact, I think 80% of the Republicans involved in the national security apparatus would sign full-page ads in the Wall Street Journal saying how unacceptable he is. Yet he's been incredibly prudent. The reason is he respects the combatant commanders. He respects General Mattis. He listens to information. And he's not quick on the trigger. And I think it galls me that somebody like Jeff Zucker can walk in here and sit here and say that Fox News is a propaganda channel. I'm not here to defend the Murdochs. They're big boys. They can defend themselves. But you can't name a more propaganda outfit than CNN. Did anybody at CNN, did any editor, any news person, any anchor, anybody get fired for the awful mess they made of the 2016 campaign, which was a disgrace to journalism? No. That is a propaganda outfit. Every night it's hate Trump. And I understand from a business model, you want people, the hate Trump crowd to rally around that. But to come in here and say that another network is propaganda is absolutely, totally absurd. And he's not, and by the way, has anybody in the opposition media questioned him or gone after him about that? No, they cheer him on.
So let's talk about propaganda outlets. Breitbart News, what's gone wrong?
The chief propaganda. Look, it's a it's a very difficult time, I think, in all conservative media, particularly about how you're going to pay for things, right? Obviously, advertising after we won, right? When I left, the traffic was on fire. We had costs under control, all the advertisers there. After we won, all of a sudden people woke up. It had to be the Russians or it had to be Breitbart, right? It had to be some reason besides you were just rejected by the American people. And so Breitbart became
but their audience is halved.
The audience is down. I think that's
halved.
I think that's the
not down. It's halved.
I think that's the difference between just doing aggregation and look. I had a theory. You got to break news. You got to make news. Right. That's what people come for. You have to have a sense of urgency. You have to have a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
And people have to feel that they need this information. The site's a little more aggregation a day. I think the guys have a different strategy. The people, that's my team that's there.
They haven't got a political brain like you working it. I mean, real propaganda. I mean, they're doing news, maybe.
You say propaganda, right? Today's environment, there's no, the even-handed sources is a thing of myth. The editorial page of the Financial Times is on the front page, right? It's on the front page, just like it is the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. And so when you get a small taste of your own medicine,
but Steve,
of your own medicine, right?
And we report without fear and without favor. Did you not read
it's
that?
It's the first thing I read every day.
Yeah.
I read the FT.
So why would you want to read propaganda every day?
Because I have to know what the party of Davos thinks. It's know thy enemy. That's why I read propaganda every day.
I'd just like to point out on the record that I haven't been to Davos for 2 years.
Because you understand which way the wind was blowing. The populist nationalists are taking over.
Why did President Trump go to see the gutless globalists in Davos?
I think it was a terrific trip. I think it was a terrific idea. I would have liked the speech to have been a little edgier. I think it was a little too rah-rah. But President Trump, here's what I saw about Davos. They were like 10-year-old kids. They treated him like a rock star. This is the sophistication that you see at Davos. All they are at the end of the day is a collection of groupies. They were running around trying to get selfies with them. It was ridiculous, embarrassing. That is the global technocratic managerial elite that runs our world.
So you got a sort of weird satisfaction from seeing all these billionaires.
Yes.
But in substantial terms, you must have been aching in the gut.
Well, no, I thought it was great that he went. Like I said, I would like the speech to have been a little edgier.
It was a sellout, wasn't it?
It was not a sellout. I think he did a great job. And given that the tax deal had just gotten done, he's talking about American jobs. He's bringing jobs back to the deplorables. The dinner the night before the CEOs, I think, was terrific. So I would have, been a little more like the money changers in the temple, but he decided, I think, to have more of a rah-rah speech, and I think it played very well.
Right. So let's go back to your favorite subject, which is national populism. Yeah. You stood alongside Marine Le Pen of the Front National, and you said, when they call you racist, wear it as a badge of honor. What did you mean by that?
Here's the thing, and this is the great thing about the propaganda media. If you look at that speech, I built up...
That was just a question.
No. Because this is the headline CNN had 2 seconds after it. I built up to that.
Well, he did. You did say it.
Hang on, because I talked about what is economic nationalism that Donald Trump went on. Doesn't care about your race, doesn't care about your color, doesn't care about your ethnicity, doesn't care about your gender, doesn't care about your religion, doesn't care about your sexual preference. It cares about one thing: that you're a citizen of the United States of America. Donald Trump, and it's the reason that Clinton did not have the big turnout among working-level blacks or Hispanics, Donald Trump has done more for freedom and anti-racism in this country than anybody. We have the lowest unemployment of blacks in American history, 17-year low in Hispanic unemployment. We have rising wages now in construction, agriculture, where you have a substantial black and Hispanic working class. He really worked to have the repatriation of the $3 trillion to be focused back on capital equipment in those things. Donald Trump has done more for race relations through his economic program than any president. And that's why I told these people, I said, listen, the identity politics. When Hillary Clinton came out the first week I was announced as the campaign CEO, he said racist, white supremacist, and I sat there on the TVs and I told the group right there, I said, if she's going to run on identity politics and we run on economic nationalism, this was August 19th and we're down by 12 points, we are going to beat her. Okay, and we did, and that's the reason. If they call you racist, they have nothing else to argue. They will not, and by the way, CNN never put up the quote about economic nationalism. They never put up the quote about what Donald Trump's done. You know why? They're gutless. They're absolutely gutless, and they will not debate the facts. What they want to do is put the headline down there, Bannon says racist, where's a badge of honor, and get a panel up there of everybody with their head blown up. And that's why they're a propaganda outfit, just like the New York Times.
Now, you're a student of history, not just Italian history, but also French history, and therefore you will be aware that Marine Le Pen denies that Jews were rounded up in 1940 at the Velodrome and sent east to their deaths in their hundreds.
Was she the runner-up? She did say that. Okay, she did that. Was she the runner-up in the French election? Did 40-some% of the people in France vote for her? Was I up there to say those people are perfect? They're not perfect. The deplorables are not perfect. I'm not perfect. I believe in the tenet of the Judeo-Christian West that man has fallen. We're not perfect.
No.
But those are working-class people in France. And by the way, they represent the second most...
Perfect. We're not perfect. But again, as a student of history, doesn't it worry you when a political leader seeks to erase a dark chapter?
Certainly does. Certainly does. It absolutely does.
And that is...
I didn't sit there and said I supported everything she said. I went there for one reason. I didn't even say I supported Front National. I went there for a reason to tell them they're not alone. That this anti-establishment, populist nationalist movement, as personified in Italy a couple days before, where 2/3 of the people voted anti-establishment, is on the rise. It's on the move. And it's only going to get stronger. It's only going to get more powerful. There's only going to be more anti-establishment. And the reason is the party at Davos is destroying your citizenship, they're debasing your currency, and they're taking your data sovereignty. And as long as they continue to do that, people are going to rise up against it. And you can see it in the polls across Europe, and you can certainly see it in Italy, where they've had 4 governments forced on them from the European Central Bank. And now you've got 2/3 of the people, both left and right.
They've had 54 governments, or 55 since World War II. I mean, in Italy...
That's because of Mussolini. That's because of Mussolini. They don't want a powerful central government.
So if there is this great tide of populism, how come that Macron won in France?
Because he's like Obama. Obama ran as a populist. When Obama, go back and look at how he ran in 2008. Obama ran initially as an anti-war populist. Macron kind of came in as an Obama-like figure.
But okay? Macron staged the greatest military parade that really the president really liked and wants to emulate. Can you imagine Barack Obama holding a military parade?
No, he's quite different, and he's taken on a lot of things of France. But look, he ran a good race and he beat them. They lost. You're not going. He beat them soundly. You're not, as I tell people, you're not going to win every fight. You're not going to win every battle. You're not going to win every election. It's the trend. It's how it keeps moving.
Why did you lose in Alabama? I mean,
we lost in Alabama. We lost in Alabama very simply. The Republican establishment are the people that came out with the pedophilia. That was Mitch McConnell and Tim Miller, and that crowd came out because they would rather not be in a majority than have guys like Roy Moore. Roy Moore wasn't my guy. My guy was Mo Brooks, okay? My guy got blown out in the first round.
Right.
But it was very important to keep someone like Luther Strange, who is epitome of the swamp, in support the Christian right, is what we did. And by the way, was Luther Strange with $32 million not beaten by the people in Alabama by 10 points? And Roy Moore would have won if it was not for the pedophilia thing that was put out by Tim Miller and the Republican establishment.
There's no truth in that?
No truth in what?
In the story about...
Well, they'll adjudicate. By the way, they'll have plenty of time to adjudicate. I've looked at the evidence and I think it's totally trumped up. However,
trumped up, probably not the right word.
I think that they'll have plenty of time to adjudicate that. I believe the woman's going forward, and we'll find out.
Let's just step back for a moment. Steve Bannon's career trajectory. You have had an extraordinary here into filmmaking, here in military service, Goldman Sachs. Then within a few yards of the Oval Office. And now, what next? Have you not got some media venture?
Well, I'm looking at a lot of stuff. I think principally, it's a lot of people are talking to me about different media things. There's lots of media companies out there that either need capital or need to be are up for sale. So it's not. This is a very difficult time, I think, in news. I think it's a very tough time in media. I think particularly going forward, it shouldn't be lost on us. We're having this big debate about people's data and information. A lot of the companies today depend upon the monetization of their subscribers' data to make a go of it. As we go off these legacy systems, this pays a lot of bills, right? As we go off that system to a more digital system, how you actually pay for that and how you build a community. I think everything's about attention and influence, attention and influence, attention and influence. How you monetize that over time is tough. That's why a lot of people, so I am looking at media properties, but I'm also looking at building a digital grassroots army here in the United States to support the populist nationalist movement and to start to get like a think tank or something to start to weaponize ideas. We need to have more well-defined economic. It shouldn't be lost on anybody. The big thing we fought for about China, all the hawks, we have the $60 billion of tariffs, but most importantly...
It's not enough, is it?
Well, it's not enough, but it's the 301 is very important because that is about forced technology transfers that China demands to take our high technology, okay? But it's ironic that not in the program for the deplorables is this $4.3 trillion budget that's going to have trillion-dollar deficits as far as the eye can see. And I think it's quite ironic on the day that you put up $60 billion in tariffs to your creditor, because if the Chinese are there, they've got to finance, they're the people we go to the financing or the bulk of the financing of these deficits. And so I think that the permanent political class in Washington, D.C., has to start to rethink this thing through because we're hurtling towards a financial crisis in the next couple of years as night follows day.
Even with 4% growth?
I think if you do the math, even with 4% growth, I don't think it gets you. I don't think the deficits get down, demonstrably. Yeah, 4% growth, and I think you'd actually have higher growth. The growth could be fine, but it doesn't mean you're not still digging yourself. Right. The tax deal was supposed to have concomitant budget cuts over it. Right? Not that the permanent political class would have, $1.3 trillion of additional spending. And by the way, to cut to the heart of it, the $780 billion for the military spending is because we haven't rethought our obligations. We're the underwriter, the guarantor of this liberal post-war rules-based order that everybody loves. The party at Davos loves it. They had Xi there when Trump was giving the American Carnage speech. Xi was there. They were all raving about him, right? And we underwrite it. The deplorables underwrite it with their tax dollars, and the deplorables underwrite it with their kids. Europe doesn't pull their weight. NATO doesn't pull their weight. The Gulf doesn't pull their weight. The guys around the South China Sea don't pull their weight. In the Northwest Pacific, they don't pull their weight. If they want to be allies, they have to start to pull their weight. The United States cannot continue to underwrite the rules-based international order, and that's how you have a $780 billion defense budget, and that's how you end up with trillion-dollar deficits as far as the eye can see.
Now, we're running out of time here, but I wanted to ask you a couple more questions. Just tell us, because you've spent a lot of time with the president, what is the conversation going to be like between President Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un?
I don't think it'll sahappen, so I don't think there will be a conversation. So I just don't think it'll happen. No. I mean, the president
said it was going to happen.
Well, the president may try to make it happen. I just think the logistics of how you do it and where you do it, et cetera, are quite tough. It's quite difficult. I think the president's done very smartly, put the pressure on China to make sure that they take care of this problem. I know he has said that he wants to meet with the dictator of North Korea. I just am a betting man. I think the over and under of that.
But the reason you're saying that is because you basically said there's nothing to be done. They are going to be nuclear power, and we've lost. And the president was furious about that.
I don't actually think I said that. I said the solution to China, we can denuclearize North Korea. What I said is there's no bloody nose. There's not a military solution. I was very specific. China is the key that picks the lock in North Korea. North Korea is a creation. Its nuclear power, its nuclear program is a creation of China. Okay? They've used that to keep the Japan and the United States back on their heel. The solution to Korea goes through Beijing. And I've said that consistently as a China hawk from day one because it happens to be correct. Now, the reason I don't happen to think, and the president's going to try to work some out, I don't even know where you'd meet. I don't believe a president of the United States would ever travel to the DMZ to meet with...
He could have it in Moscow.
I just don't believe that the dictator of North Korea would ever leave his country.
You meant the dictator of Moscow or the dictator in North Korea?
The dictator in North Korea.
Right.
Was that trying to get the Russian? That was a dig to try to get the Russian thing. That was trying to get the. You guys are obsessed with it. Okay, Russia's economy. I'm no apologist. I was on a destroyer. Its mission was to hunt Soviet submarines. Right. My daughter's a captain in the army. No. the big reveal of President Reagan, the reason that they put the plan together to destroy the Soviet Union is when he realized that the Soviet Union's economy was the size of California. Then he realized it's not some giant. The Russia's economy is the size of New York State. It's in a demographic death spiral. It can't create any technology. It lives off natural resources. Are they bad guys? Absolutely. Is it a kleptocracy? Absolutely. But we've got the greatest enemy and the greatest power we've ever had in our history in China. The elites, led by the opposition party media that never questioned them for 25 years, have accelerated and exacerbated their growth. They're now on the path to become a hegemonic power. If you don't believe that, listen to Xi's 19th Party Congress speech and listen to that speech last week. That speech last week was as nationalistic as anything's been going. And now everybody's going, oh my gosh, look at this. This has been 25 years in the making. And the elites in this country, and Peter Schweizer's new book, Secret Empires, talks about Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden, feeding at the trough of Chinese influence operations, and nobody questions it. Do you think we got in this situation with China just because it happened? It didn't happen. The elites in this country exacerbated their growth, okay? And that's why Brexit and 2016 are inextricably linked, and they're linked because of China. The exporting of Chinese deflation and overcapacity helped to gut the Midland heartlands of England, and it gutted the upper Midwest of the United States. If you go out and give this speech to workers in the United States, the Harvard study shows there's a direct correlation between the factories that left, the jobs that left with them, and the opioid crisis. This stuff just didn't happen.
This is an important insight, but I'm going to leave you with one further historical insight, perhaps. You've often been described as an insurgent. I can imagine if you'd been living in an earlier age, you would have been with that group swarming into the White House in 1828 with General Jackson. You'd certainly have been there. But if we go back to Mussolini, in one of his last...
Are you going to make another terrible off-the-mark analogy?
I've been doing my research.
Go ahead.
And
have at it.
I came across the love letter that Mussolini wrote to his longtime lover. And he said...
The mother has 9 children?
No. There were 8 lovers and 9 children.
Okay.
Right. Let's get that right.
Okay.
He said...
Virility.
Goodbye, darling. If I could blow up the world with dynamite, I'd do it. Do you sympathize with that?
Did I say he was a bad guy? Even the Financial Times think you just do it once and be fine.
But you quite like to blow up things, don't you?
I think that our institutions have to be questioned and have to be challenged.
But blown up?
Certain of them, yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt. There's no doubt.
Positive note, Steve Bannon, thank you very much.
Thank you.
everyone. Looks like they changed that camera shot on us. Just a couple minutes behind here. They should be getting underway pretty soon.
I was looking at the shadows on your face.
Well, they got our hopes up there. Let's see if this gets underway.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and His Eminence Archbishop Demetrius.
Hello, everybody. What a group. What a group. Great to have the Archbishop, is that right? It's really fantastic. Good afternoon. I'm thrilled to be here with so many wonderful friends and supporters to celebrate this very special occasion, Greek Independence Day. Important day, right? We're delighted to be joined by members of my cabinet, as well as representatives Carolyn Maloney. Where's Carolyn? Good. Very good. Gus Bilirakis. Where's Gus? Gus Bilirakis. Hello, Gus. Thank you, Gus. Doing a great job. And Virginia Fox. Virginia. Where's Virginia? Hi, Virginia. And the great Howard Lorber, who's not Greek, by the way. On behalf of my entire administration, I want to extend a very warm welcome to the hundreds of proud members of the Greek American community. And we have a whole group of people outside who are with us today. I especially want to extend our deep gratitude to His Eminence, Archbishop Demetrius. Thank you, Archbishop. Highly respected and a great gentleman, for joining us in this really beautiful celebration. I hope you're having a good time. We have been honoring Greek independence here at the White House since 1987, a tradition we know will continue for many, many years. I'll only be with you for another 7. Today we commemorate the Greek struggle for independence that began on March 25th, 1821. After almost 4 centuries of foreign rule, brave Greek patriots fought to reclaim their freedom, their sovereignty, and their right of self-determination. The Greek fight for independence enjoyed an outpouring of support throughout the Western world. The citizens of France, Great Britain, the United States, and many other nations were moved to action by a cultural and historical kinship tracing back thousands of years to ancient Greece, the birthplace of, and you know what this is, democracy, right? The birthplace of democracy and of really Western civilization. All around us here in the United States, we see the profound influence of Greek culture, art, and philosophy. In the Federalist Papers, our founding fathers consulted the wisdom of the ancient Greek city-states when writing our own Constitution. They learned a lot. They knew what they were doing. Our nation's generals, scientists, lawyers, and educators continue to find inspiration in the works of the ancient Greeks. And throughout this capital city, from the Supreme Court to the Lincoln Memorial to the beautiful, beautiful White House. You like the White House? What a house. We see the magnificence of Greek architecture. Finally, we see Greece's enduring influence through so many Americans of Greek descent who contribute so much to this nation that we love. In celebrating Greek independence, we honor this influence and we remember our common heritage. We take renewed confidence that whatever challenges we might face, anytime in the future, we will face them together. We'll all be together as members of a great community of nations. And like our ancestors, we too will draw strength from the bonds of history and culture that unite our countries and shape our destinies. Today we celebrate Greek independence, such an important day, and a day that so many people called, they wanted to be here, and many of them were not Greek, so you'll have to explain that to me. But they wanted to be here, and we renew our commitment to the values and principles that make us who we are. We stand together for freedom and justice and democracy today and for all time. Thank you for joining us for this incredible celebration. May God bless you. May God bless Greece. And may God bless the United States of America. And now I'd like to introduce His Eminence to say a few words. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Mr. President, distinguished friends, as a Greek-American community celebrating our annual Greek Independence Day, we are deeply grateful to you, Mr. President, for inviting us to the White House to honor again this special day. By inviting us, you honor not only us Greek Americans, but also all members of the Orthodox Christian faith. Even more, you honor the spirit of freedom and human dignity that dwells in the hearts of all humanity. Our American Declaration of Independence speaks of truths that are self-evident: the equality of all people and their God-given rights, among them the right of liberty, freedom, and self-determination. These truths are ideals that all great faiths and philosophies have maintained as very important values. It is a paradox, then, that such self-evident truths are often the ones that we must advocate most passionately and defend most strenuously, time and time again, frequently with enormous sacrifices. The Greek War of Independence that started on March 25th, 1821, is a prime example of this. On that day, the people of the Greek nation had to rise up against their oppressors and fight a long and bitter fight, necessitating huge sacrifices in order to gain truths that are self-evident, namely their freedom and independence as individuals and as a nation. Mr. President, we are grateful that you share these vital American and universal principles. We kindly ask that you continue to affirm them all the more in this troubled world. We further ask for your special care and attention to the continuous injustices suffered by our Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople in matters of full religious freedom. We humbly request that you speak on behalf of all of us for a fair and equitable solution to the prolonged and tragic division of Cyprus and to the issue of an appropriate and historically justifiable name for the state of Fyrom. When we celebrate Greek Independence Day, we celebrate a beginning but not a completion. The fight for freedom and human dignity globally is ongoing and unfinished. For standing with us, Mr. President, for fighting for us, and for speaking universal and eternal truths of life and liberty, we thank you. We pray for divine favor upon us, the First Lady, whose presence honors us today at the White House, and your entire family. And we close with a beautiful biblical blessing from the book of Numbers. May God bless you and keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you and be merciful to you. May he lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, they said Mrs. Trump was going to be at this celebration as well, but it doesn't look like they made an appearance. Well, regardless, you saw it here live on News Now, part of Fox10Phoenix.com. Speaking of Phoenix, how's it look outside? Well, let's watch.
Nothing like the smell of turpentine, right? The smell of victory. Oh. All right, let's see if we can get through this. You okay? Do you hear me?
Actually, I can.
Okay. I'll try to speak louder, Paco. All right, good morning. As you just heard at the press briefing that preceded us, today is World Water Day. This morning, the Secretary General spoke at the high-level event to launch the International Decade for Action called Water for Sustainable Development. He said that the growing water crisis should be much higher on the world's radar and stressed that safe water and sanitation are key to poverty reduction, economic growth, and healthy ecosystems. He added that the water has historically proven to be a catalyst for cooperation, not conflict, but he warned that without effective management of our water resources, we risk intensifying disputes between communities and sectors and even increasing tensions among nations. His remarks are available online. And I have a water-related update from UNICEF. Colleagues who, in partnership with the global entertainer Beyoncé, have been working to provide safe water to women and children in Burundi. So far, they have built 35 wells, and thanks to a new partnership with Gucci and Chime for Change, 80 more will be built this year, benefiting 120,000 women, girls, and families. More information on UNICEF's website. The Deputy Secretary General is in Liberia today, and in her meetings with President George Weah, she underlined her commitment of the United Nations to support his administration to achieve meaningful progress in addressing sustaining peace and advancing sustainable development. She also attended an event hosted by President Weah to celebrate the completion of the mandate of the UN mission in Liberia, UNMIL. Speaking to the press afterwards, she said that the UN mission is yet another successful peacekeeping mission in West Africa. It was deployed in 2003 to a failed state with state institutions in ruin, a non-existent economy, and a disintegrated national police and army. Since then, the state has been rebuilt, with more than 100,000 former combatants participated in disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration programs. Justice and security institutions were restored. She said that today Liberians enjoy peace, and UNMIL leaves behind a country that has great potential to achieve lasting stability, democracy, and prosperity. Ms. Mohammed is now said it's now up to the government with the full.
All right, everybody. I think I found something that some of you may enjoy a little bit better. Not like there's anything wrong with the daily UN press briefings, right? But I think. Let's listen to the Senate floor for a little bit live here, and then, depending on what they're talking about, I may or may not have something else for you. You're watching News Now, part of Fox10Phoenix.com.
Pressure career in the Senate was Gabrielle never let it take her away from her most important job, and that's being the mother to three young men who are up here in the galleries tonight: Henry, Will, and Charlie. And she has always said to me, my most important job is being a mom, and she is a darn good one. All of her family are up here in the gallery, not all of them, but I think some of the most important is one of her 3 sons, and her husband, Josh, how many years? 20 years. 20 years. And her sister, Erin. Who's been, I understand, not just a sister, but just a great friend, a great aunt, and just a wonderful support system for Gabrielle at times when she's needed that. But our thanks to, I want to thank these 3 boys. I want to thank Josh for sharing your mom and your wife with all the people of our country. And we want to thank Erin for being just a terrific sister and supporter. A few years back, Gabrielle brought her oldest son, Henry, to our staff holiday party at the Buena Vista in near Newcastle, Delaware. And I was talking with Henry at the time. Henry, I think, was 12. And I asked him to tell us one thing that his mom had taught him.
All right, everybody. We have about 45 minutes left here on News Now, part of Fox10Phoenix.com, for the rest of the afternoon, the rest of the day. Let's go to today's State Department briefing with Heather Nauer. What do you say? It's actually almost exactly 45 minutes long, too. Thanks for being with us today, everybody.
Good to see you. Good afternoon. Okay, a couple announcements I'd like to start out with this afternoon. Where's your colleague Matt Lee? Where'd he go? Well, we can't start without you. Okay. I hear you. You know, the other day I actually walked down here with mismatched shoes.
Really?
Yeah. One shoe was leopard, the other shoe was gold. And I've just misplaced my toppers. Oh. I'm so sorry. So could you bear with us for 1 second? My apologies. How's everybody?
Good.
Okay.
Isn't wearing mismatched shoes a fireable offense in your former profession?
It probably would be, yeah. I thought about getting away with it. I said, nobody's going to care here. But my male colleagues convinced me otherwise. Gold and leopard, I don't know. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. Okay, a couple things going on today. First, I'd like to announce a project that we're pretty excited about, and this is over in Jordan. We're pleased to announce today that the Department of State and the government of Jordan have inaugurated a new regional counterterrorism academy in Jordan. The department was represented for the opening by the Assistant Secretary for Diplomatic Security, Michael Evanoff, and the U.S. Embassy in Amman's chargé, Henry Worcester. The academy was funded, constructed, and equipped through the department's anti-terrorism assistance program. Once it's fully operational, the new training center will double ATA's regional counterterrorism training capacity in the country of Jordan. Through the ATA program, Jordan has become a regional training hub for Jordanian police and police from at least 21 other nations. The department's ATA program receives funding and policy guidance from the Bureau of Counterterrorism and is administered by the Bureau of Diplomatic Security and its Diplomatic Security Service. So we were pleased to announce the opening of that. Secondly, it had to be moved from yesterday because of the weather. It will now be held tomorrow, and that is the International Women of Courage Awards here at the State Department. Tomorrow, our Deputy Secretary of State, John Sullivan, will present the 2018 Secretary of State's International Women of Courage Award with remarks from First Lady Melania Trump to honor 10 extraordinary women from around the world. It's now in its 12th year. The Secretary of State's IWOC Awards recognizes women around the globe who have demonstrated exceptional courage and leadership in advocating for peace, justice, human rights, gender equality, and women's empowerment, often at great personal risk and sacrifice. Since the inception of this award in 2007, the State Department has recognized more than 120 women from 65 countries. Following the award ceremony in Washington, the honorees will travel individually to Austin, Texas, Cleveland, Dallas, Pensacola, Phoenix, Raleigh, Salt Lake City, San Antonio on the International Visitor Leadership Program. American organizations and businesses will host the awardees and collaborate with them on strategies and ideas to empower women in both the United States and abroad. The awardees will reconvene in Los Angeles for a closing ceremony before returning home to their home countries. We congratulate these 10 extraordinary women, and we look forward to honoring them here tomorrow. That event is open press, so we hope to see you there. And then lastly, a short while ago, you probably saw and heard the Secretary Tillerson speaking to our State Department colleagues, thanking our colleagues and their family members for their service. He reminded us that people make the difference here at the State Department, the work that we do each and every day. So on behalf of the building, I'd like to thank Secretary Tillerson for his service and sacrifice that he has made for the country. It's a lot to leave family, to leave a good job, to leave grandkids, and a beautiful ranch. So that is a reminder of the sacrifice that he made. The other day, in a brief reception with some staff, he mentioned that becoming Secretary of State helped him fill a hole, and by that he meant sacrificing to serve his country. It was a way that he did that, and that has now been satisfied. So, sir, I would just like to say that we would wish you all the happiness, success, joy in your new life, and thank you for your service as you now return to normal life. And with that, I'd be happy to take your questions.
Thanks. Just on that really briefly, did you speak with him today? I mean, does he still feel that given the manner of his dismissal and the fact that he was the subject of so much rumor or speculation, a lot of it what he called or alluded to as mean-spirited in his remarks, does he still feel like that the sacrifice that he made filled the hole?
I only said a quick word to him today at the reception or at the before he left the building, but the other day he was talking about that. That was just 2 days ago that he said that how much it meant to him.
Can I ask you, this is a bit unusual, this report about the charges being dropped against President Erdogan's bodyguards, Was the State Department involved, or did the State Department seek for these charges to be dropped on Valentine's Day, the day before Secretary Tillerson met with President Erdogan?
I can tell you that the department had no role in the decision to drop those charges. That was entirely coming out of the Department of Justice.
Okay. Did you have any? You said you didn't have any role. Was there any contact, any cooperation, any coordination with them?
Not that I'm aware of. This is completely a Department of Justice decision.
Was the secretary or were members of his team aware that this had happened?
I am told that the secretary was aware of the decision before he met with President Erdogan in Turkey. He noted that the timing was coincidental, but he also noted it was a good example of how we have an independent judiciary in our country, and that the Department of Justice made those decisions and took it from there.
So he did raise it in his meeting with President Erdogan?
I am told that the secretary did not discuss this issue with President Erdogan in any type of a quid pro quo, that the secretary was certainly aware of it and believed it was noted that it was just an example of how our judicial system works here and that it was a coincidence in timing. He went on to talk about, apparently, I'm told, that courts operate free of political influence.
Okay, so but he didn't talk about it in terms of how this is a way that the U.S. can show that it's willing to improve relations with.
I am told the answer to that is unequivocally no.
Okay, so you keep prefacing this with "I am told."
Well, I didn't ask him this question. This story just came out this morning. I've not spoken to him today, and I was not there.
Right. Well, no. This is one of the problems. No one else was there, except for the foreign minister, which was noted as unusual, as being unusual at the time. And I would just wonder that, wouldn't it have helped to have at least one other U.S. government official in the room when this meeting was going on, so that there could be this kind of thing? You wouldn't have to say "I am told." It would be coming straight from,
Matt?
Yeah?
I understand.
All right.
I completely understand.
Can I pick up just on a bit on Tillerson? Is he still officially leaving or leaves the position on March the 30th?
March 31st will be his last day as Secretary of State, so he still retains that title, that commission. The Deputy Secretary is handling everything else day to day.
And was it always a plan for him to leave this early? I mean, actually leave the building?
This was something that was under consideration. At what point this decision was made, I don't know.
Oh, so it wasn't a surprise, as in the last few hours, that he would then leave? Or?
Well, this wasn't a sudden thing that all of a sudden he decided to, pack a backpack and head on home. This was something that he was considering for some time.
And then on another issue, on China, as you saw, the president today signed a presidential memorandum on kickstarting a process that could see up to about $50 or $60 billion in tariffs on Chinese goods. What was the U.S. role the U.S. State Department's role in this decision? And do you believe that this could, in fact, a lot of people believe that this could begin some kind of trade war? Mm-hmm. Do you believe that this could in any way affect your relationship with China as you're trying to tackle regional issues?
Well, let me take the last part of your question first. We have a longstanding relationship with China. There's a lot of work that is left to be done with two massive countries. One of the key things that we will be dealing with regard to China is the DPRK. And let me remind you that they voted in support of UN Security Council resolutions on sanctions for North Korea. So we don't believe that has changed, that we ask them to continue to adhere to those resolutions. And so we have a complex relationship, certainly with China, but we have a lot of areas where we have to work together with them, and they recognize that it's not just in the United States' best interest, but it's in China's best interest. And I think the president overall has been very clear from first day on the campaign trail, long-standing concerns that he has and administration-wide people have with China's unfair trade practices. Two large economies, it's natural for us to have to address things that we don't agree on. One of them is certainly trade. The president has fought very hard for advancing opportunities, economic opportunities for American businesses, but also the American people.
Do you believe that the president didn't actually impose those restrictions today, as many had said or reported before? Do you believe that this could be leaving some kind of door open to the Chinese to negotiate some kind of?
I'm not going to speculate on that. The U.S. Trade Representative issued a pretty thorough report about their concerns with China's unfair trade practices. I can give you a copy of that if you like, and so they are handling much of this.
I'm just trying to get to the relationship, which is a foreign policy and a diplomatic relationship, which also affects, those moves also affect this building. So do you see any kind of impact on on the relationship between this department?
Well, as I said, I think China recognizes, and we recognize, that we have to work together on a lot of areas of mutual interest. But the president has made very clear from the beginning. Remember, it was a year ago, I think it was a year ago this time, that he sat down with President Xi at Mar-a-Lago. And one of the issues that was brought up, that the president brought up with President Xi, was China's unfair trade practices. We had our 4 strategic dialogues last year, all of them completed. One of them specifically was on China's unfair trade practices. So this announcement would come as no surprise to the Chinese. The president is looking out for the best interests of the American public and American companies, and this is one step that the administration has decided to make. Hi, Lisa. Sure.
Thank you. He also has been saying all along that he was holding off on holding off on such measures because he was seeking Chinese cooperation on the North Korea issue. And then you just, kind of noted that China has signed on to several resolutions, working with the United States on these type of sanctions. So isn't that a little bit of an inconsistent message? He got the cooperation and then imposed the tariffs anyway? No,
look, China has engaged in unfair trade practices for years and years. And this president has decided to call him out on it and to hold them to account.
That's a fair point. But at the same time, do you think it was wise to kind of tie the imposition of these type of tariffs to Chinese cooperation on other national security issues, which you are getting?
Look, China has been cooperating with us for the most part. We always say that they can do more on the issue of North Korea and denuclearization. This is not just something that the United States is asking for, cooperation on denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Many countries are, including China. So it's not just in our interest to get Kim Jong-un to give up his weapons programs. It is in the interest of China as well, and we think that China recognizes that.
I totally see your point, but now that the president has been making Chinese cooperation on North Korea such a big issue, and he's imposed the tariffs anyway, aren't you concerned that perhaps that cooperation will wane?
No, look, China recognizes it.
All right, everybody, we're going to continue to watch this, but I have some breaking news for you. President Donald Trump just tweeting. This is a quote from a tweet, direct tweet. I am pleased to announce that effective 4/9/18 at AMB, John Bolton will be my new national security advisor. I am very thankful for the service of General H.R. McMaster, who has done an outstanding job and will always remain my friend. There will be an official contact. I think he meant to say contact handover on 4/9. So that's breaking news right now.
If Director Pompeo should need any assistance.
But if there's no sort of formal duty, why is he retaining that title?
My understanding is that because his commission is up on March the 31st.
Okay, and then just to follow up on the redesign, what is the status now of the redesign now that he's left the building? Is that being frozen? Or?
It's called the Impact Initiative now. The status of it is that it goes forward. We will largely maintain sort of an even course, a steady course between now and the time that if Director Pompeo, if the Secretary-designate does become the next Secretary of State, we want to keep things calm for him, ensure an orderly transition, hand things over to the Secretary-designate if he becomes the Secretary of State. Hopefully the Senate will confirm him. We would certainly like a speedy confirmation if they agree that he is the best person for that. And then we'll hand over all the information to Director Pompeo, and he can make a decision about what he would choose to do with the redesign. We talked about this the other day. Some things are sort of no-brainers, like getting us in the cloud, getting us up to speed with our IT. Other things he may want to do away with, but that would be his choice.
The groups that have been meeting between USAID and state and the money that was spent on outside consultants and things like that, is that going to continue to be spent? Will those groups continue to meet?
I would imagine that any contracts that we have in place would continue to go forward until those contracts, I mean, this is just a guess, that contracts would stay in place until those contracts expire. But if there's anything more for you, I'll have on that, I'll let you know.
When you say the Deputy Secretary is doing all the day-to-day duties, that means that he's handling anything that would be at the Secretary's level involving interagency or foreign governments.
That's
the
correct.
Secretary, although he retains the title, does not speak on behalf of this administration to foreign leaders anymore.
That is correct. That is my understanding.
So,
I mean, he may get a phone call from somebody congratulating him on his future,
being
but
fired. I'm just curious because I mean he's going to keep security as long as even though he's not doing anything that is related to the nation's business, he's still going to have diplomatic security agents. He'll still presumably have access to classified information.
my understanding
and
is that he was processed out today.
Oh, okay. So all of that is gone, and he does not have security provided by the State Department.
I don't know about security. That's a very good question. I'll look into that. I'll ask our DS and get back with you
Okay,
on
so
that.
literally the only thing he still has is the title.
That is my understanding.
Thank
Yes,
you.
and the Deputy Secretary is handling all the meetings, all the bilateral meetings, all the big decisions that are now being made at the State Department. It's all on his plate, so he's doing two jobs. Okay, go right ahead.
The situation, the military operation from Turkey in Syria is still going on. You expressed your concerns last week. How about the working group announced by Secretary Tillerson in Ankara last month? Is it working? Is it meeting? Is it working towards a solution for Minbej? I saw the readout of President Trump called with President Erdogan a few minutes ago. There was even a mention about Syria, about this situation. What are the steps you can?
Well, as you well know, just because a readout states a certain number of things or issues were addressed does not mean that other things weren't discussed as well. Often more delicate things we will handle in private conversations. So I'd have to...
It means that they didn't think it was worth thing.
Not necessarily. No. You cannot make that assumption. It sometimes means that things are delicate and we choose to not put it in a readout because it's delicate, and we sometimes think that we can best handle complicated negotiations in a more private fashion. In some countries, that's more important than with other countries. I'd have to refer you to the White House, though, for any additional details on the president's call with President Erdogan. But I can tell you that was something, the mechanism was something that was agreed to between Secretary Tillerson and Secretary Erdogan about a month ago. We did have the first of that the first of that mechanism meeting here in Washington about 2 weeks ago. We had about 24 Turkish officials who came to the United States, meeting with about 24 State Department officials. That was on, I think it was a Thursday or Friday, and that was here at the State Department, so I'm guessing you all missed that, right? They got them in and out the doors without you guys all realizing, right? So those conversations are happening. Deputy Secretary Sullivan spoke with his counterpart over the weekend, and then the president spoke to President Erdogan. So clearly those conversations are very important. As a NATO ally with a lot of stuff going on in Syria, we have a lot to talk about with the Turkish government.
So, Heather, you're not saying that readouts of conversations that are issued by this administration should not be taken as faithful representations of the content of what was discussed?
I'm just saying, look, a readout gives a broad overview of what was discussed, but not everything in the readout is going to be what was discussed. Some things you don't put in every single detail about that, and that's private diplomatic conversation, and that's standard, normal from administration to administration. You know that. Okay.
Does the mechanism plan to meet again, or
when we have a meeting to announce, we'll certainly let you know. Okay. Hi. Yeah. Go right ahead. I'll come back.
I often ask you about the Palestinian teenager Ayat
Yes.
Tamimi. Yesterday, the Israeli court behind closed doors sentenced her to 8 months in prison for slapping an Israeli soldier. On the same day, they reduced the sentence of an Israeli soldier who killed an incapacitated Palestinian in cold blood to almost the same amount of time. Is, in your view, the Israelis sort of deal with the Palestinians with a different scale of justice altogether?
Saeed, I think I'm not going to answer that question. That would be entirely up. No, that would be entirely up to law enforcement. I'm not there to see all the details of the case, so it would be very unfair for me to comment on that. You know, we have talked many times about the importance of fair trials, about the importance that all individuals be treated humanely. I mean, this is nothing new. We've had this conversation many times before.
So you think that by sentencing this young girl to 8 months in prison for slapping a soldier is basically justice was being served?
How many times have I said this? We believe that all people, especially children, should be treated humanely and fairly, and their human rights should be respected. We've talked about that many times before. Our position has not changed.
So you're not appalled by any measure by the fact that a young girl gets sentenced to 8 months in prison and a person who killed another person in cold blood.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I'm not going to weigh in on a case that took place in another country that would entirely be a matter for them to address with you. Okay, Lori, hi.
To go back to Turkey, the foreign minister yesterday said in response to your comment that there may not be an agreement on manmage, but there is an understanding. Is there an understanding? If so, can you put it?
We're going to start splitting hairs here, right? Between agreement to understanding, all of that. I can just tell you that our talks with the Turkish government are ongoing. Those talks have not been concluded at this point, and we look forward to continuing our conversations with the government.
Okay, they also seem to threaten an attack on Manbij as well. What is your response to that?
U.S. forces are located in Manbij. We have made it very clear with the Turkish government that we continue to operate there. We have made our concerns very clear with the Turkish government that we have a right to defend ourselves, the U.S., along with its coalition partners on the ground there, and we have encouraged Turkey to de-escalate overall, and that's why we continue to have conversations with that government.
And you have no intention to leave?
We have no intention to leave, but beyond that, I'd have to ask you to talk to DOD.
Okay, and the Iraqi Kurds are very happy now that the airports have been opened, but there's one important issue outstanding, and that's visa regulations. Up until now, people with American and EU passports could travel to the Kurdistan region airports without visas if you had a U.S. or EU passport. That now may change. Do you have a reaction to that? And are you concerned that a country like Iran, which has influence with the Iraqi Interior Ministry, might be exercising control over this?
I can tell you, I've just heard that report. It's still hypothetical, so I just don't want to comment on something that's a hypothetical like that, okay? Hey, Abby.
Do you have any information on reports of the death of a U.S. citizen, Andrew DeRogi, an Amherst College student in Mexico City?
Yes, I just heard about this as I was coming out here, that a young man had died in Mexico. And I just want to express our condolences. Anytime an American citizen should lose his or her life overseas, that is certainly a tragedy. I'm not able to comment on any specifics of his case, but our thoughts and prayers go out to the family. I know that we are offering, or at least have provided assistance to the family, our consular officers who are so compassionate and do such a great job of helping families in very difficult circumstances, and I know we're offering our assistance to them.
Are you able to say whether the U.S. is at all engaged with Mexican authorities on the nature of the death?
I'm sorry, I'm just not aware of that at this point, but I would imagine that we would have tough conversations with Mexican officials.
India?
Hi, how are you?
Do you have any comments on or update on the government of India reaching out to their U.S. counterparts about the details about this big scandal that has broken in India about involving Cambridge Analytica or their suspended CEO, Alexander Nix? Have they reached out to you for any cooperation?
Not that I'm aware of. I'd just have to refer you back to the government of India on that. If they had a contract with them, I'm just unaware. Okay. Okay. Hi, Nike. Hi.
If I may, I would like to switch gear to Africa. Kenya. Do you have anything on the Embassy of Kenya is starting a campaign to help locals to identify fake news and then to help them to stop, reflect, and verify before forwarding any misinformation. First on that, and secondly, is any other Are any other American embassies doing the same thing?
Yeah, so I'm aware of that program that's taking place out of our embassy. I believe it's being run out of one of our American centers. Which, if you're traveling overseas and you've never been to one of our American centers, it's a pretty neat place to go. It's a place where young people or older people can go and kind of hang out and work on college applications and all that. I had an opportunity to visit one in Bangladesh, which was a neat opportunity. So I believe it's being run out of our American Center. The idea, I think the genesis came from our ambassador who is serving there. And the idea is, if you ever talk to somebody who, no offense, but in their early 20s, they don't know how to identify legitimate news sites. I have these conversations with their babysitters all the time, and they'll come to me.
Just people in their
They'll come to me with a piece of news saying, "Hey Heather, take a look at this," and I ask, "What is the source of that news?" And they'll say it's some blogger or vlogger who apparently is a YouTube star, and I've never heard of him, but I'm much older than they are, so what do I know? The point being is that seems to be an issue, especially with younger people nowadays, perhaps with folks around the world as well, where they don't know how to go to legitimate sites, or they don't ask the questions and verify themselves what the source is of this information. So I think the ambassador was just trying to help teach young people in particular how to identify real news and how to identify fake news. And so I think it's probably a good idea if it's going on in other embassies. I'm just not aware of it. Okay, Janie, hi.
Thank you very much. North Korea, excuse me, I'm sorry. South Korean government proposed U.S. and South Korea, North Korea, a trilateral party talks. Will the U.S. accept this trilateral talks?
I can tell you, and you've probably seen this reported in the news by now, that South Korea and North Korea are planning to have a meeting ahead of our summit, which we have not announced any dates yet at this point. They're planning to have a meeting. We are in close coordination with the South Koreans and the Japanese, for that matter, about all of these meetings and all of these talks. So we have no comment or plans on a possible three-way summit, but we're still going under the operating premise that we will be meeting with North Korea.
Yeah, only bilateral talks with the North and
Yes.
the United States.
Yes.
Do you have anything here from North Korea recently?
Not at this point. Not at this point. I don't have anything new for you on that. I'll let you know. Yeah, sure.
So you don't have anything from North Korea. Are you just basically kind of making plans going ahead on what the North Koreans are telling you? I mean, wouldn't you like to hear from the North Koreans that they're...
Well, that's why I go back to our close relationship with South Korea. I mean, South Korea has been perhaps our best interlocutor in dealing with this issue. As neighbors, as two countries that had preliminary meetings already, they worked out some of this framework at the Olympics, and so we trust our allies and partners, and so we trust South Korea. Certainly.
But don't you feel a little bit uncomfortable about going ahead and making preparations for a meeting with another country that you haven't even had an official confirmation directly from?
This is just complicated diplomacy, Elise, and I think that's just the way it works. We are looking forward to having these meetings and conversations, and we trust our South Korean allies, and we trust the Japanese, and this is an U.S. government-wide program, which we're standing by.
Don't you need at some point some kind of official confirmation?
Look, I'm not going to get ahead of that. I'm not going to get ahead of that. I'm not going to speculate. I think where we are right now, we're doing just fine. Okay. Okay. Hold on, Connor, go ahead.
Get your response to the budget that was passed yesterday or today. The president is expected to sign. They actually gave you a 4% increase over last year's budget, not the nearly 1/3 cut that the administration had proposed. Just your response to that, and if you plan on actually spending all that money.
I guess I would say thanks, Congress, and thanks to U.S. taxpayers, and we will take our lead from OMB and from Congress on that. Okay?
What does that mean? We'll take your lead from OMB on that.
Well, what we end up being given, we look forward to that.
Well, the White House is going to sign it, so this is almost $56 billion, which is, as you mentioned, almost 4% more than last year, and a lot more than what the administration was asking for, that Secretary Tillerson, or soon to be ex-Secretary Tillerson, endorsed. So can you assure the people who are working for this building that this money that you will take it and you will spend it?
I'm not aware if we ever just sit on money, but look, I can just say we thank the Congress and thank them for their work and for the faith in the State Department. And you know, a lot of folks complained last year when we didn't have enough money, and now if we're getting more money, I don't see the need for complaints.
What I'm getting at is that you're not opposed to this. The building, the administration is not opposed to an increase in funding for the Function 150.
I can't imagine that we would be opposed to. I can't imagine that we would be opposed to an increase in funding. We're in a transition period now where we will hopefully have a new secretary coming in, and he can make some of those determinations at that point. Wait, hold on. Go ahead, Rich. Yeah.
Is the transfer of the $40 million from the Pentagon to the State Department for the Global Engagement Center complete, and is there a status update on getting the expansion of that office started? Sure.
So part of what we're doing is awaiting the funds from the Department of Defense for the Global Engagement Center. That's $40 million. That memorandum of understanding was signed a few weeks back. Last I checked, as of Tuesday or so, that money had not been sent over yet, but I know that DoD had to look through some of its various programs and decide where it was going to take that money from. I think it wasn't just sitting in a pot earmarked for the Global Engagement Center. So what we're doing is taking a look at our overall priorities. Look, one of the big issues that has been going on for far too many years now is the horrific fight against ISIS. And so the Global Engagement Center has been engaged in fighting ISIS and trying to turn around that messaging. We don't want more people to join ISIS. We want to turn people away from ISIS. So that has been one of their priorities. And then about a year and a half ago or so, an additional priority was added to the Global Engagement Center, and that is countering state-sponsored propaganda. So that is something that's still getting ramped up. Part of my job here will be to really focus on this. I see that as a very important issue. When we look at the propaganda that we see coming out of governments, including Russia, including Iran, including China, and there are others out there that exist, but those are just the top three that come to my mind. When we see that propaganda coming out that we believe needs to be corrected, changed, influenced in some way, that is a priority of ours, and so we really look forward to staffing up this operation and resetting that as a priority for the Global Engagement Center. I've had a lot of conversations every single day since I got back here from Israel with my counterparts over at the NSC and here in the building about the importance of that and what our plans are. So when we have something more about our intentions and our goals and achievements on the Global Engagement Center, I'd be more than happy to bring that to you.
And as you've gotten into the details of it, do you think $40 million is sufficient? Or? Well,
it certainly sounds like a lot of money to me, but I think it's a good place to start. Okay. Go ahead. Saeed, I already called on you. Go ahead, sir. Hold on, come on. We go to somebody else, right? Our Kurdish friend. Yeah, go ahead.
Turkish jets attacked 3 Kurdish villages in northern Iraq and killed 4 civilians. I'm just wondering if you're aware of those reports, and also Iraqi foreign ministry called it a violation of the sovereignty of Iraq. Do you share that view?
I'm not familiar with that report. I'm sorry, I just haven't seen that yet. I will take a look at it and see what we can get for you about that, okay? Okay? Okay.
The Jordan announcement?
Yes, I did.
Yes. So can you tell us more about this so-called counterterrorism site? Jordan, if you look at human rights organizations, there's use of torture in Jordan. What is the State Department position on torture, including methods like waterboarding? Does the State Department regard that as illegal?
I think that the United States' long-term cooperation with our strong partner in the Middle East, Jordan, is very well known, very well established. Our relationship with Jordan is as strong today as it was a few years ago, as it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and much further back than that. They have an excellent military. They have an excellent police force. They are close cooperating partners of the United States and, frankly, many other countries as well. I think our position on that on the part of the U.S. government is very clear. We will work with this government, and we work with many other governments around the world in the fight against terrorism and the fight against ISIS.
So you're fine with torture, including waterboarding?
Are we doing this again? Are we doing this? Are we rolling back the clock to 15 years ago again today?
Well, it's just that
it's my friend from the nation here.
The CIA nominee, among other things, oversaw a site in Thailand that's been accused of conducting torture and destroyed the video evidence.
I'm pretty sure that I work for the State Department and not the Central Intelligence Agency. So if you have any questions about that, I'd refer you over to that building.
This administration is winding down the clock, so I'd like an answer to the question rather than a diversion that I'm winding back the clock, because this administration is winding back the clock.
I don't know. I don't know how you. I don't know how you think that. I think our position on torture, on human rights, is very well known. We support the government of Jordan. We do not support, we do not encourage any of that kind of use that you allege.
Legal in your view?
The U.S. government has declared that. I don't recall the exact year, but a few years back, maybe it was 7 or 8 years ago, said that that is not a technique that the U.S. government endorses. There was a time that the U.S. government had told personnel that it could use that. And I will remind you, let me just remind you and go on a little sidetrack here, that our military forces, when our special ops go through that training to become special forces, Navy SEALs, all of that, they go through that training. They go through what you're referring to as torture. I just want to put that out there, that still exists today.
The Department view is that waterboarding is torture and is illegal.
I'm not going to go back and have this conversation with you once again, okay? I think we've taken enough time on this, and let's move on. Asai, go right ahead, and then we'll come to China.
Could you share with us what is the update on Ghouta? Because the Syrian government and the Russian claim that 90,000 civilians have departed eastern Ghouta, and militants are being moved to the north and so on. Could you update us on what is the situation?
Yeah, overall, I think the humanitarian situation in eastern Ghouta remains dire. We've seen the reports of many thousands of people attempting to leave. We've also heard reports about people attempting to leave and then being killed as a result. We continue to call for the ceasefire that was supported by 15 other countries at the United Nations Security Council almost a month ago. Pardon me? 14 countries.
14 other countries.
14 other, oh, pardon me, Matt, 14 other countries. 15, that includes the United States.
Okay.
So we continue to call for that ceasefire to be put into in force, and that has not happened just yet. Most importantly right now, aside from that ceasefire, is getting the humanitarian aid in that needs to be gotten. You know, by the way, did anyone see that video of Bashar al-Assad driving around Syria as though it was a normal place, like he was just some normal dude going out for a drive? It was like car talk. I don't know what was up with that, but what that man should do is stop killing his own people. Stop killing innocent civilians. Adhere to the UN-led ceasefire resolution that was passed by 15 countries, Matt, which includes the United States. Adhere to that. Let the humanitarian aid get in.
You cannot independently confirm that 90,000 people have left eastern Ghouta.
I cannot confirm that. I mean, we're not there, we're not on the ground, but we talk to aid groups all the time, and I just don't have the recent updates on any numbers. Connor, go ahead.
Can you update us, though, on what the U.S. is doing to try to implement the ceasefire? Have you made any more calls to other leaders in the region? Or
yeah, so this is something that comes up all of the time. The U.S. government is in constant communication with our foreign allies and partners about the situation here. We have Ambassador Haley is hard at work on some activities and actions at the United Nations. There may be, and I don't want to get ahead of anything that she could announce, but certainly looking at other resolutions, and that may be something that we can put in sort of our arsenal, if you will. One of the important things is holding someone responsible for the use of chemical weapons. We know that those have been used in Syria on innocent civilians. Russia destroyed the Joint Investigative Mechanism at the United Nations. That was the mechanism that would hold an individual accountable, an individual country accountable for chemical weapons violations. Russia stood in the way of that. We are looking at other types of mechanisms that could be used. JIM, the Joint Investigative Mechanism, was the gold standard. So we hope that we can get something else in place to hold them accountable. I mean, it's a government-wide effort here on the part State Department, having communications with the Department of Defense, the National Security Council, responsible and many other countries overseas. So we're working on it, hoping that we can get something going. Yeah.
I assume it goes without saying that you guys would support an OPCW investigation into this spy poisoning case.
Well, OPCW is investigating this spy poisoning case.
They don't buy it.
Okay. So, as many of you know, Russians, I think it was yesterday, said that, this could have come, the poisoning could have come from yet another country, which is ridiculous. I mean, we put out a statement about that saying, that is a joke, that it could have come from another country. We've seen Russian claims like this before, when Russia claimed not to be responsible for its little green men in Ukraine, where Russia claimed to not be responsible for the downing of the Malaysian air flight in 2014 over Ukraine. We've seen Russia continue to perpetuate the conflict in eastern Ukraine. They make a lot of claims. I think it's pretty clear we stand by the Brits, as do many other countries, that Russia is responsible for this. Okay, we're gonna have to wrap it up and leave it there. Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, madam. As far as the China action is concerned, finally this president took action against China, because I have been saying for many, many years, according to the press report, China has been using, as far as prison labor and also cheap labor. So my question is, are you sending a message to China that respect human rights and rule of law, freedom of the press and freedom of religion, among others, and also stop arresting the innocent people for the cheap labor?
Yeah, sir, despite what our friend here from The Nation may think, the United States consistently stands up for human rights. China is one of those countries where we have those conversations where we talk about the importance of freedom of religion, human rights, fair trials, and all of those other things and ideals that the United States government holds near and dear to our hearts, because that's fundamentally what we believe in. We speak to other governments, China in particular, about media freedoms and all of those things consistently in all our diplomatic conversations. I'm going to have to leave it at that. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Before you get to before you get to Saudi, can you? I had this question I've been trying to ask for 3 days now about this case in Bahrain, about Dua Awadeh, who was convicted yesterday, sentenced to 2 months in absentia. Do you have anything to say about that, given what you just said about your calls for free trial,
and that is
fair
something
trials?
that is something that we talk with our partners in Bahrain. We have those conversations with the government of Bahrain, with Saudi Arabia. We have difficult conversations with countries that we also have relationships with. That is a fact. We hold our ideals near and dear to our hearts. Those consistently come up in our private conversations with other governments who don't adhere to those ideals that we believe are so important. Excuse me, I'm talking to Matt here. You ask about Dua Al-Awidi. She is residing in London. So we saw the report that a Bahraini criminal court sentenced her in.
Anybody having beach thoughts? Anybody? Look at this live picture here. I believe they're still in Tampa, Florida. They may have switched beaches out there. But hey, thanks so much for being with us today. That's going to do it for Fox News Now, this Thursday edition. We'll see you all tomorrow. Have a great evening.